I know 2 of the 5 personally, and I patrolled with them personally and had a relationship with them, which means you can't say that if he never ran that he would still be alive when the stop was illegal in the first place. There is no way, form, or fashion that you take a police boot and you strike a man's face multiple times while he's on the ground. No form, no way, no fashion. There is no way that is excusable. I don't care who you're fighting. A kick to the face right here, that can be lethal. And unless you're trying to intentionally kill somebody, that is not a tactic that is taught, nor should ever be used.
I don't know if this is considered snitching or not, but if it is, I 100% support it.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Man, welcome back to another episode of the Ruling Class Podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Diddy, back up in this witch with another video. Listen, I asked everybody, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please make sure that you're still subscribed, comment on this video, share this video, do all that good stuff for the YouTube algorithm to help your boy out. I really appreciate it. Now listen, I'm not gonna waste any time. I've seen you all's DMs, comments. A lot of you all have reached out to ask me to speak on a couple of things that have been happening surrounding the whole situation that's happening in Memphis, surrounding, Mr. Tyre Nichols' untimely passing, right? So before we get into the super viral video, and I mean it went super viral, of the former police officer, before we get into that video, I want to go ahead and address a couple of things. I did see where Mr. Jason Whitlock, who is a former sports analyst, I did see where he went on Fox, and he has some very interesting things, to say the least. Some very interesting things to say about the Memphis Police Department. Let's take a listen.
I would examine the racial element of this, because there is a racial element. And this is a story about young black men and their inability to treat each other in a humane way. Everybody involved in this on the street level was either 24 to 32 years old. Everybody. It was a group of young black men, 5-on-1. Looked like gang violence to me. It looked like what young black men do when they're supervised by a single black woman. And that's what they got going on in the Memphis Police Department. They've elected or put some black woman in charge of the police force. And we're getting the same kind of chaos and disunity and violence that we see in a lot of these cities that are run by single mothers. If we want to discuss the breakdown of family that leads to disrespect for authority, that causes you to resist the police and run from the police and not comply with the police because you resist authority at all time, because there was no male authority in your home, let's have that discussion. But that's not where they want to take us. They want to take us down the path of saying, you know what, this is Tucker Carlson's fault. This is some random this is Donald Trump's fault. It's not. It's the breakdown of family and the buying in to all these left-wing things that have nothing to do with promoting family.
Look, the truth of the matter is, there's some truth to what he's saying, right? I think there is a history of a lot of emotional black men, right, who a lot of times, if you look at the statistics, a lot of times the most emotional black men come from homes where there's no father, right? They're raised by a single mother. So I think there's some truth to that. But where I disagree with him is that you can't blame what happened earlier in January to Mr. Tyre Nichols to single mothers, on single black mothers. I just don't see how that can work, because my first problem with that is most of the unarmed so-called black men that have had their lives taken by police officers at the hands of police officers the past just 15 years that we've seen, from George Floyd to a lot, we can go down the list. They had their lives taken by so-called white men. Were those so-called white men raised by single black mothers? No, right? So there's the first problem with that. The second problem is, brother, I understand that everybody wants to point at this so-called black woman, but you look at most of the problems that we've had, or most of the problems that people complain about when it comes to police officers, it's men that are running those departments. It's not women. So what do you have to say then, right? You're going to blame it on white men in that particular case? You're going to blame it on the black police chief at that particular case? I know everybody's coming for the police chief in Memphis, which brings me to my next point. I know a lot of y'all have reached out and said, hey, Diddy, can you please speak on the police chief of Memphis being fired from her last job in Atlanta, right? There's a story that came out that said that the police chief of Memphis, you know, the lady who's went on a tour, which I don't really necessarily agree with her going where it's almost like a celebrity tour or something of her just speaking on the case on every different left-wing platform. But that's a story for another day. She was allegedly fired for defending somebody who was allegedly within child pornography or things, so something of that sort. I'm not really for sure what the story is, but my thing with this is, yes, I agree that this police chief should take some blame. Yes, I agree that the police chief may not be the best police chief in the world, and I also believe that, you know, when your police officers mess up, it's a reflection of you and it's a reflection of your department and your training or lack thereof. But my problem is, we're still talking about human beings, right? So if these police officers have the best training, but they still to go out and mess up, right? Yes, the police chiefs should take some responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's still the police officers who were out in the streets who decided to not act accordingly, like these 5 police officers did, right? So I want to say that for the record. That's just where I stand with it. I don't think all of the blame should go on her, regardless if she's the most professional or not. Now, to the video with the former police officer. This video is crazy, so without further ado, let's see what he had to say about what took place.
What's up, guys? So a lot of you know me for my Spanish content, but a lot of you also know that I was a former Memphis police officer between the years of 2016 and 2021. And I just want to give some insight into the Tyre Nichols incident that's going on with my former police department, so stay tuned. So people have been asking me, you know, I left the department in the end of 2021 after 5 years of service, and people ask me all the time, what do you think about the Tyre Nichols incident moving forward? And there are some points that I want to point out after watching the video and kind of seeing what's been going on in Memphis that I think will be really interesting to you. So 2 of the 5 officers I did patrol with personally and did have a personal relationship with 2 of the 5. So I'm going to be talking from a personal standpoint and from a standpoint as a former Memphis police officer and what I see moving forward. And even though I know 2 of the 5 personally and I patrolled with them personally and had a relationship with them, this in no way excuses any of their actions that partook about 2 weeks ago with the Tyre Nichols incident. The first thing that I want to talk about, which is utter BS, is you'll see a lot of conservatives, but you see a lot of far-right conservatives that say, why did he run? He would still be alive if he ran. That's not a guarantee. So the first thing that came out was that this all started because this was a reckless driving, but now the chief of the department is saying that there is no evidence of reckless driving, which means you can't say that if he never ran that he would still be alive when the stop was illegal in the first place. Now, I have had to pull out people, rip people out of a car aggressively at gunpoint with foul language many a times, but most of those people were murderers, robbers, sexual assaulters, the worst of the worst, where you needed to meet violence with violence. Never once did I put my gun in the face of somebody who I suppose for reckless driving, right? So from the get-go, you have a man who was not guilty of anything fleeing from the police because he's scared because he doesn't even know why he's getting pulled over in such an aggressive manner. So as a black male, I probably would have ran too, and I was the police for 5 years.
Look, listen, let me just say I'll be the first to admit that I never once, I'm not a conservative, but I did have the point on one of my last videos, I'll tag it here, where I just stated like where we need as within the so-called black community, we need to be taught the proper etiquette of being pulled over by the police, because a lot of us just don't know how to behave. We have an attitude. We do a lot of very suspect behavior. No, none of it justifies you having your life taken. But what I'm saying is there is a proper way to just conduct yourself with people in general. And a lot of us don't do that, right? So I made that point just as a side note. I did not make that point as a justification as to why somebody should have their life taken. So I want to go ahead and put that out there. And I will also say, he stated that even he, as a former police officer, probably would have ran or not stopped for the police if he didn't understand why he was being pulled over. Respectfully, I disagree with you, man. Like, if you're being pulled over by the police, even in an aggressive fashion, I don't understand, like, yes, if the report is coming out that there was no high-speed chase and he didn't go into ongoing traffic, that's the report that I read. If what I read was incorrect, then I fully will correct myself and I stand corrected. But nonetheless, if you're being pulled over by the police, I don't know how it will end well for you by not pulling over, by getting out of the car and wrestling with the police and taking off. Not a justification for having your life taken, but I'm just saying, I don't understand how that's supposed to help you, especially as a former police officer. That's the only part I disagree with him on.
Number 2, there is no way, form, or fashion that you take a police boot and you strike a man's face multiple times while he's on the ground.
Agreed.
No form, no way, no fashion. There is no way that is excusable. I don't care who you're fighting. A kick to the face right here, that can be lethal. And unless you're trying to intentionally kill somebody, that is not a tactic that is taught, nor should ever be used. Number 3, if you are a police officer, I don't care how cool you are, people, you never, ever, ever let your fellow officer do anything that you wouldn't let be done to you. You are just as guilty as the lynch mobs who used to lynch black people and watch them die and get lynched, even though they never put a hand on them. You are just as guilty. And my last point, everybody from the beaters to the paramedics to the regular officers on the scene that stood there and watched is going to lose their job and should, because once you look at somebody, no matter what crime they did, and you take the human out of them, you have now also lost your humanity and now your freedom.
I 100% agree with the officer. I 100% appreciate him. And let me just say shout out to that former officer. If his name, I believe, is Brandon. Thank you, Brandon, for coming out and sharing this. It means a lot, right, to put yourself out there, because there's this thing called Blue Shield where I guess police officers, it's almost like a gang, right? Police officers are not supposed to tell on one another. They're supposed to take up for one another. Even if they feel like other police officers in the wrong, that's something that we've been hearing, us as citizens, as civilians. We've been hearing that for years. So I appreciate him coming out, even though he's not a police officer anymore. A lot of police officers will probably still stick to that code. So a lot of respect that I have for him for coming out. Again, this video has went super viral. At this point in time, I believe it has over 700,000 views on TikTok. So I really appreciate it. I 100% agree with him, right? And I was consistent, but it's like one of those things. It's like with situations like this, it's so sensitive. You can't say at the same time he did not deserve to die, but man, his conduct. You're not supposed to say that. People hate it when you do that, because it's almost as if you're using it as a justification as to why he got his life taken. That is not what I'm doing. I don't think that's what a lot of other people did. We're just raising up. Like, if I had a son who was a teenager, I would just be raising my son, hey son, this is the proper way to behave with the police, right? Not to say, again, I can't stress this enough, not justifying why the man had his life taken, but I'm just saying there's a proper way to to conduct yourself with the police. I believe, I've been saying this from the jump, I said this in my previous video, I believe the officers are guilty. I believe they should be convicted. But how we've seen things be handled in the past, there's a chance these police officers could get off. I hope that does not happen. I do believe that those paramedics and everybody else on the medical squad that was present, that did not assist Mr. Nichols appropriately during that time, should lose their job. And even in some cases, they may even be charged. I wouldn't have a problem with that, because I think all of us can agree that what we witnessed was not only unprofessional, but it was unethical, it was inhumane, and it was very unfortunate, you know. So I want to say RIP to Mr. Tyre Nichols. I send my condolences to him and his family, you know. I believe yesterday was the funeral. They led him to rest. We'll get into Al Sharpton and the race hustlers in another video. But for right now, I just want to send my condolences to his family. Right, y'all hop in the comment section and y'all give me y'all thoughts. What did y'all think about what Jason Whitlock said? Is it single black mothers' fault? Hop in the comment section and give me your thoughts on the former, Memphis police officer who, came out with the video. Tell me what you thought about what he said. Until next time, peace.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.